teenager win in Indianapolis?
4, here's the finish. Sam Hornish Jr. makes the pass. He'll win it. Sam Hornish Jr. goes to the inside of Marco Andretti and wins it in the final 100 yards. Sam Hornish Jr. has won the 90th Indianapolis 500 in an incredible finish.
Tell you, what a winner and what a driver. He sure deserves it. But we had a lot of adversity today, but he came back and won that race. I can't even believe it.
That's how Roger Penske described the emotions. Mike King on the radio call. Sam Hornish Jr., the dramatic pass over Marco Andretti, and that race, hard to believe. 20 years ago, back in 2006, when Sam Hornish Jr. was an Indianapolis 500 winner, and he joins us now on the program. Sam, first off, it is cool still to hear that 20 years later. It doesn't feel like 20 years ago, but thanks for joining the program, man. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
Hey, is it how often do you hear that call? You know, can a teenager win at Indianapolis and then Hornish makes the pass itself? Or how often do you see the pass?
I never get tired of hearing it, I can tell you that much. But a lot of times when I do speaking engagements, people will ask me, if we're going to put up something that, kind of signifies, your racing that would get the people, interested in what's going on, what would you pick? I'm like, the last 4 laps of the 2006 Indy 500, and then they watch it and they're like, man, that's I forgot how good that was, or I never saw that, or whatever the deal happens to be. And then, most of the times before I get ready to speak, that's playing, and I'm like, a lot of times I sit there and the first parts of my speech were like, I get nervous every time I watch it because it's like, this is going to be the time that I don't get there. So,
is it honestly
I made it once again, so that's awesome.
When you watch it, is it kind of obviously you're watching it in that form in a third person, but when you watch it, is it almost surreal to you sometimes to be like, I really did that really was me and I really did do that kind of thing?
Sometimes, yeah. It's still, really, kind of emotional to a point, just because of the fact of how incredible it was. And, I would say that regardless of, the fact that it was me, either way, if I would have won that or lost that, it was still a great race. And the fact that I won it makes it even better for me. But to think of, that being the 90th running, and that was the first time that there was a pass on the lead lap or on the last lap for the win, it is really saying something to it. And, the only thing that really, to me, rivals that is, the call for the 2011 race, with Hildebrand and Weldon, and, for a whole different reason. But, now the cars are different, with the tows that they get and the amount of, drag that they have on them, it makes those races, a lot closer. And, I think that now we're a little bit more used to seeing stuff like that. But, yeah, definitely, I was down for the count, from turn 3 until turn 3, and somehow we came back to life as far as, when you listen to the radio, you listen to the TV, they had Marco's face on the trophy already.
Well, listen, I'll never forget. At the time I was working at Channel 6, that was the last year before I was actually part of the Speedway Radio Network. And I remember when Marco came in, I was there right when Marco got out of the car, Sam, and he got out of the car and he takes off his helmet and the sock over the head, and he says, "Where did the speed come from?" And I remember he repeated, he goes, "Where did the speed come from?" So I'll ask you, Sam Hornish Jr., because I've never asked you, where did the speed come from?
It was always there is the key. If you look at the whole month of May, every day that we were on track that year, from qualifying to first day to the final practice to the carb day, myself versus Marco, it's about a 4-mile-an-hour difference on most laps, and that's what the difference was on the last one as well. And, the big thing that you have to remember, being a rookie, they gave him a car that they were trying to make sure that he could make it to the end of the race. So it had more downforce on it, which means more drag. It creates a bigger hole in the air. He can go slower, I can go faster and behind him. He was probably running if I were to guess, somewhere in the area of +2 on the rear wing, and I was running -4. And it was because I'd been there, I'd been experienced, and we knew that that's what it was going to take to win that race and to compete against Weldon and Castroneves and Dixon. So the funny thing about it is and not funny at all for Marco, but he was probably running 12th or so when the yellow comes out, and he cycles through and is in second and gives them an opportunity to win the race. But he didn't have the speed to win that race outright.
Right, organically, right.
The circumstances presented themselves for him to do it. And I mean, you saw Rossi win in 2016. Like, the race is the race. It's 500 miles. You get to the end first. It doesn't matter how you do it. So I had to overcome adversity. He got placed a hand that worked out better than he probably thought he was going to for 450 miles for that race. So that's the speed difference. Just really comes down to, what kind of car I was willing to drive, the experience that I had, and the fact that we were more trimmed out. And, that's the same thing that, Elio and Dixon and some of those other guys were going to do. The first couple years that you run at the Speedway, they generally put, a little bit more downforce on the car, make it a little bit more comfortable for you so that you can make it to the end, get that experience. I was too dumb for the first 3 of my Indy 500s to use the extra downforce. I wanted to be the fastest car, and ended up biting me. So, he got a second place finish out of it.
Did you ever talk to Marco about it? I mean, you guys are kind of bonded to an extent from a race fan standpoint, but for you personally, did you guys ever sit down at any point and just talk about those last couple laps?
I don't know that we ever really talked about it too much, but I can tell you that there was a point in time that I was driving down to Indy for an event. I don't even remember what it was, and I got a phone call from an unknown number, and it was Marco, and he left me a message, something, hey D-bag, I hear you're coming into town tonight. Let's catch up. And I played it for my wife, and she goes, "You did beat him in the last 100 feet of the Indy 500." So I think if anybody has the right to call you anything, it's probably him. So we laugh about that from time to time. But there was another instance in 2007 where we were doing the autograph session, and on Saturday or Friday, I can't remember when it was, and he was sitting beside me, and somebody brought up a picture of the finish. And the way that everything plays out, you've got both cars in the picture, and the walls, being the walls at the Indy 500, don't have, writing and stuff all over them. So it's a great place to sign right underneath your car on the inside of pit wall. And he goes, "Do you like signing that?" Marco said, "Do you like signing that picture?" I said, "Yeah, man, it's pretty cool. It's a great win, and,
Yeah.
definitely unexpected." And he said, "Everyone that you sign winning, I have to sign losing." I'm like, I like it a lot better now. So,
yeah, you got the better end of that deal, right?
Yep, that's for sure.
Here's what I heard, and I want you to tell me. Sam Hornish Jr. is my guest, the 06 Indy 500 winner, and I want you to tell me if this is fact or fiction, okay? But I was told in that race, obviously what we do know is fact, is that you had an incident where you exited pit lane, and I think you had a hose or something still connected, so you were penalized, and it looked at that point like your day was done, right? And you fight your way back, and you start picking your way through. Now, I was told that your intensity in that moment, that at one point you actually snapped at Roger Penske on the radio in a very expletive form to basically say to him, like, "I got this under control. You just got to let me drive." Fact or fiction?
I think that's fiction. I don't remember that, but somebody would probably go through the vault of IndyCar in-car radio and probably prove me wrong. But I do remember, I probably did snap at him some point in time when I was driving a NASCAR, but I really, tried to give Roger as much respect as I always could, because he is definitely deserving of it. But, when we went back out there, we were still under yellow. Roger called the races because he was my strategist, and one of the things that, Roger liked to do that was different was he wanted to call when to leave the pits. Most of the teams, it was the right front changer, as he would get done, because he was usually,
Has the best view.
faster, the
Right.
two front, he would be able to stand up and look at the fueler and see when the fueler was pulling out. So Roger's got a little bit taller version, plus it's Roger's car. It's got Roger's name on it. It's Roger. You're going to let him do whatever he wants to do. And he's waiting for Chris to start pulling that fuel probe out, and he sees him do it, but it gets jammed. So then we have that problem. We go back out. We're under yellow, and everybody's dejected, and there's not a whole lot going on the radio at the time. And I said, hey, if we say fuel, can we make it to the end from here? And they're like, no, but when you come down to serve your pass-through penalty, if we fuel, you can maybe make it from that point. I said, so all I got to do is stay ahead of the leaders. I ain't got to do anything but just run hard enough to stay ahead of the leaders. And then when they pit, because Weldon, those guys were battling out for the win. They're going full tilt. They're running as much fuel as they can possibly go. So, it was a strategy there. And then even when Giafone crashed and brought out the yellow, I thought, man, now it's really over, because a couple of guys have pitted and now they have new tires, and, I'm on old tires and light on fuel. But it all worked out the way that it should have. But I don't remember snapping at him at all. I just, if anything, I think I might have said, I got it, and he was probably telling me, save fuel. And I'm watching the mirror and seeing Weldon getting bigger and bigger, knowing that I had to stay on the lead lap. And at some point in time, we were going to have to go. And whether we ran out of fuel or not, that was going to be how we had to play our cards.
You know what's funny, Sam? Sam Hornish Jr., my guest. I remember, after you won Indy, and obviously you went over to NASCAR, and I had limited, and I wouldn't expect you to remember this in any way, shape, or form, but in calling a couple of NASCAR races, the Brickyard included, I called the races at Kentucky, things like that. So I would cross paths with you, and during that time, I realized you were in the midst of your racing career, and you were really buttoned up, and I wouldn't say shy, but you were always reserved, and I would imagine that was in the middle of my career level focus. You sound right now like a completely, I'm not going to say different, but just a laid-back, relaxed, life is good at my fingertips dude, as opposed to when you were racing. Do you feel...
You should have talked to me yesterday.
What's that?
I said you should have talked to me yesterday. So... I am in a lot of ways, because at some point, you gotta take care of the sponsors. You want to do the right things. You don't want to say the wrong things. And my problem a lot of times is I wanted to make everybody happy. And when you try to make everybody happy, eventually you make nobody happy, including yourself. So, I do have a little bit of wit about me and a little bit of comedy and charm. But a lot of times, especially when I was on TV, I put that to the side because I was reserved and not wanting to say the wrong thing or have somebody have ammunition against me. But yesterday, my oldest of my sons was running a go-kart race, and he was leading with 4 laps to go, and he got passed. I'm like, just get in second and just wait for the last lap. And then he tries to make the pass, and he got loose and ended up getting passed by 4 other carts and ended up getting back to fourth. But for whatever reason, everybody's like, do you love being at the racetrack? I'm like, no, I hate it. Like, this is insane. Like, I want to puke. Like, it's my son. I've got no control over it. Like, watching on TV takes me back to being a kid. Being at a racetrack and watching a race is one of the hardest things that I can do.
So now that you watch your son race, do you have, because I remember, your dad was obviously very involved in your early racing years. I think PDM was who you first came with at Indy, right? And yep. So, do you now have a greater appreciation for what your dad went through in the early days that you were racing?
My dad really probably told my son it the best that I could ever think of. And he said, Sam, he goes, I feel really bad for you. telling my son, and he goes, why, Papa? He goes, because when your dad and I were first starting racing, he goes, I had no idea what was right or wrong. I only could watch how it progressed in how he finished, and that would tell me whether he did the right things or the wrong things. He goes, he knows so much about it that when he sees you go around the track, he can almost tell what you're going to do before you do it. And he goes, so he's always going to want to tell you this is how you should have done it, or you need to think about doing it this way. And really, that's one of the things that I'm having to back myself up on, because just because I know and I can see all these things because I've experienced them doesn't mean that he's going to take my word for it the first time, because there's a computational thing that happens in our brains. As we see circumstances start to happen, we make one choice that's wrong, and then we overcorrect with another one, and we end up wrong on the other side of it. And I think that that's a good thing for all parents raising kids, and really all people that are trying to figure out why somebody doesn't do what you tell them. You know, it's like you hate seeing your kids make same mistakes that you made, especially when you've told them, you know, this is how I do it. But they're living life in real time too. And it's the difference between, will they say, yeah, I screwed that up, and they'll learn from it, or they're like, I did the right thing. It just didn't turn out the way that I wanted to. So, you know, life is about, 90% about what happens to it, of how we react to it, and only 10% about what really happens to us. So a lot of times in my life, I got a little bit too concerned with what was happening as opposed to how I was reacting to it. And it really stunted my growth in some ways. And when I got to the other side of that maturity thing, where I could start to maintain my emotions better, that was when you get a race win like the Indy 500, because I could have went out there and thrown it all away in the next 30 seconds trying to be a hero. But when you get to a maturity level where you can start to make better decisions. And then when I went to stock car, I threw all that stuff out the window too, because I wanted to win so bad. And it took me a long time to be able to get that maturity back and figure out how to run good in races, and ultimately win in the Xfinity Series, and finish out my career standing on a podium holding the owner's trophy for Roger, and finishing second that day. And that's the last time I was in a car. So it's just life is different, difficult, and to sit there and say I know what my dad was going through, or I feel for him, or any of those things, it's hard to do, because it's just his viewpoint of it was different than mine. He saw something that I really wanted to do, and basically channel it away for me to go and do some things. And then where my son, it's a different thing. He's got different expectations. He's going to go through a bunch of things that I have no idea about, because, there's going to be some doors that open to him because he's my son, and there's going to be some doors that are closed to him because he's my son. So helping me filter all that, or helping him to filter all those things, is probably my biggest job in it. And sometimes I need to sit back and not be the driver coach and just be the life coach.
For you, Sam, you won 19 races in the IndyCar Series. You were dominant, right? You won championships. You won the Crown Jewel race. And then you go over to Cup. Now, I know Dario once said that going from IndyCar to stock car was like going from a Corvette to a school bus, as Dario explained it. Aside from the learning curve of feeling out those cars, how much did it eat at you that you didn't have the sustained immediate success on the Cup side that you had on the open wheel side?
All of my life was different. So I also transitioned from being just a husband to being a father at the same time. So there was a whole lot of things that were new in life to me, and responsibilities that I just didn't have when I was an IndyCar driver. And to be real honest with you, there's probably parts of that becoming a dad that led me to make those decisions. There was obviously sponsor decisions, team decisions, things like that. But I watched the second half of the All-Star race this morning, and I was thinking back, watching Zilich. He had a really good run. And he had a problem on pit road. My first All-Star race, I transferred in and had a car that was good enough to win, and I made a mistake trying to pass Montoya on lap 2. If I'd have just waited if I would have had the calm and the poise that I would have had in the IndyCar in 2006, I probably would have just waited on that. And by, in all reality, we drove up to the leaders, 3 times throughout that race. So, I think that we could have won. When it comes down to it, at the end of the day, you never know for sure. But, some of those small choices like that, and by trying to get too much too early, set me back. And then, it was also a whole thing where, the whole series is going through a change with the car of tomorrow, and how that all changes. And, Newman and Kurt Busch, they've got different things. And I really never knew how to be that great of a teammate, because when I drove for PDM, I was on my own. When I drove for Panther, I was on my own. And then at Penske, there was a lot of things that, I probably didn't do a good enough job of trying to get out of Elio for the for the Indy 500 and for the road courses. And there was some things that he probably did a better job of getting out of me for the mile and a half on how he could run better over there. So, I think that even though Elio and I had a tremendous amount of respect for each other, I don't know that we were that great of teammates, because I don't know that we pushed each other as hard as we could have. I think that there was times where we were definitely more worried about just beating the other guy. And, that was that kind of stunted some of my growth. And it really wasn't until 2012 when, I filled in for Allmendinger in the second half of the year in the Shell Pennzoil car, and Brad was running for the championship, that I really learned how to be a good teammate and to take care of my teammates and to want the best for somebody else that wasn't named Sam Hornish.
Sam Hornish obviously is my guest there. I wanted to get your perspective on this. Qualifying is done. I'm sure, I don't know if you watched Indy qualifying yesterday. I know you had a lot going on there, obviously, but we just had an incident about an hour ago where Alexander Rossi, who starts in row number 1, Romain Grosjean, and Pato O'Ward were involved in a 3-car accident. Rossi looked to be the most, he kind of hobbled out of the car. They all got out okay, and his car had the worst damage to it. From a race car driver perspective, what does that do from a mental standpoint of knowing everything that has to go into getting the car put back together, but assuming that they're able to go in the race, and we certainly hope the best for Rossi in that situation, what does it do psychologically to then have to go into the race knowing that something happened between qualifying and the race itself?
Well, I was listening to the Fast 12 and the Fast 6 stuff last night. So seeing the jumps that some guys had and also the losses that other guys had, that was very interesting to me. How, some guys gained like a mile an hour and some guys, they just kind of, either stayed the same or even lost a bunch of speed. And it was, that's how Indy is. The weather changes, the track's so big, you've got so much shade from the grandstand that you really have to keep up on those things. In 2006, our month was basically flawless except for that pit stop on lap 150, whatever it was, and also the final day of practice. Not carb day, but the final day of practice that we got to practice, which was the Sunday after pole day. I put myself in a bad position and spun and wrecked the car, but thankfully for us, it was the T car. So I don't know how, if Rossi was in their backup car or if they were in their primary car. So I don't know how, all the roles of that at this point in time. But hopefully for him, the good car is still sitting there. But, sometimes, having that mistake early on in the, before the race is good because it puts you in a better position for when the race starts to be able to make more calmer decisions and be able to put yourself in better position for the end of the race. Sometimes when everything is perfect throughout the month of May, you just, you want to go, lights out from the very beginning. You end up putting yourself in bad situations. So I guess we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. But it sounded like a scary incident that I heard when I was waiting for you guys to come on. So I'm sure I'll have to go check it out once I get off the phone. Okay,
a couple of other things here real quick before you do that. First off, Caleb, the hospital you were born in was where, Caleb? Our producer, Caleb.
Bryan Hospital.
Bryan Hospital. Now, my understanding is, were you born there, Sam, or were your kids born in Bryan Hospital?
I was born at the Bryan Hospital.
Okay, they got a big sign there that says winners are born at Bryan Hospital. You set a pretty decent standard for everybody else to live up to, right?
I guess so.
Does it suck for a kid if
lowering the bar?
Yeah, but what happens if a kid's born there and he knows he's a natural loser? That seems to be an unfair precedent, right?
Like me, Jake.
Yeah, that's saying something. Okay, I also wanted to ask you about this. I was reading, and we know Wikipedia is all-knowing, Sam. According to the Wikipedia, you have helped out a lot at the Defiance Medical Center, including helping them add a heart center at that hospital. First off, is that true? And if it is, what was your connection that led you to feel the need for that cause?
Well, thankfully, I grew up in a small town, and even though I, have Defiance as my home, Northwest Ohio is my home. I was born in Bryan. I grew up in Stryker. I moved to Defiance when I was about 8 or 9 years old. I graduated from Archbold. I lived in Napoleon for several years. We went to North Carolina for a little while. Then when we came back, we ended up in a little town just outside of Toledo called White House. And in all reality, there's been so much of this area that has given so much to me, whether it was fan support. There was times where, we had to hawk cordless phones to be able to make it to the next race in an IndyCar, and people bought these phones and just all these little things, and the community's really been good to me. So when I had the opportunity to give back, and that hospital was being, the Defiance Regional Medical Center was being built, basically during the height of my IndyCar career, it gave me an opportunity to be able to give back. My father died at the age of 50 of a massive heart attack, 51 of a massive heart attack. And it was just one of those things where heart-related issues were kind of always on my mind, and it gave me an opportunity to be able to give back. That hospital is kind of a unique thing because it's directly between Fort Wayne and Toledo, and they don't really use that heart center as much anymore, and they're now like a level 1 trauma thing because 24 has gone into such a big highway that if there's things that happen along there, they have to use it. So they use a little bit of that cardio cath lab for that. But I didn't. My uncle went through there and had a cath done and a bunch of other stuff. So, we were able to do a lot with the community, and it was our pleasure to be able to do it.
Well, listen, man. I want to thank you for that because I know what that means for people, and I know how important it is to have a cath lab nearby. So in that regard, to have that available to people at that time, and certainly my condolences on your father, but to know that means that there might be other people that don't have that loss. I hope you understand what that means to people. Lastly, Sam Hornish Jr., give me right now your odds on this year's Indy 500. Give me the one that you think is the favorite, not named Alex Palou. Give me the one that keep an eye on them because they've impressed you, and give me the one that I guess more so than anything you've been pleasantly surprised with what they've been able to do, and that's under the assumption that you followed this pretty closely.
I don't follow anything close enough. I got 5 kids, but it was my grandfather that passed away. I don't want to, but my dad's still.
Oh, I thought you said father. My apologies. Yeah. I thought for a second. I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah.
Yeah. and I might have, but no, my dad's still around. But and he actually went with us to the race yesterday, so we had a great.
That's what I thought because you referenced him. I thought, wait a minute. So my apologies. But.
Yeah. No. Right up until about if I'd never heard the Rossi thing, it was super interesting to me because when he won in 2016, he probably didn't have a right to win, but they played the game the way that you need to play it. Now he's came back multiple times and been fast enough to win. And it seems like all these things kind of continue to happen. I'm going, I think he's got enough behind him, seeing, how he handled himself in qualifying, the position that he put himself in and done. And I was going, so I think I might have to, change that strategy. Pato's been so good at Indy too, and now he's got an issue. So you guys, you should have called me an hour earlier, and then I would have looked like a complete dunce because everybody would have been. Hey, he just jinxed those 2 guys. So. Man, you look at all the defending winners. I was surprised at how many defending winners there were when I was looking at it yesterday. So who knows what might come out there to surprise you? And it's I think that there's just a lot of parity. There's just. In some ways, if you don't allow me to choose Palou, there's 15 other guys that could get it done, and there's by no means you would be surprised that they did. However, Palou has seemed to put himself on an elevation of his own is really surprising to me because it's in an era that is, I think, as competitive as that you've seen in such a time. And I don't want to say that it was more competitive than what it was when I raced, but it seems like it's really close to that. There was a time where it was like you knew that it was either going to be a Penske car or it was going to be a Ganassi car, or however that all seemed to work out. And now it's just like all these little knobs you can turn on the cars have been taken away, and you've got, more strategy. So people are constantly looking at, how can I do this even though I don't have the fastest car, and that changes the complete, complexion of the race.
Well, there's 8 former winners by my calculation in the race. You are 46 years old. Al Unser won it at 47. Elio's going to race till he's 70, so we look forward to seeing you in the race next year.
Yeah. I have dreams every once in a while of I get a call from Roger or somebody wanting me to come race, and it's like, I got so much stuff going on. I don't think I could say yes. It's hard enough for me just to come down and watch the race.
I understand. 5 kids speaks to that, right? And fortunately, your dad around to watch it with you. Sam, listen, man, really appreciate it. And it sounds like everything is going well, and obviously I can hear that kind of peace and content within what is a busy lifestyle, I realize, after racing. But great career, no question about it, and hard to believe 20 years ago, but congratulations again on being an Indy 500 winner.
Thank you. Every time I think, man, I can't hardly believe it's been 20 years ago, I turn and I look at my 18-year-old daughter and go, you weren't here. So it's got to be 20 years ago.
That's right. Or somebody like me reminds you, right?
School this year, and it's like all hands on deck. I'm trying to get everything done because I want to do her graduation party. Like, it's just, I tell people all the time, I'm like, if I told you what I do on a daily basis, you wouldn't think I'm that busy, but I don't ever sit down until it's dark out. So I must be doing something either massively wrong or completely right.
Well, we appreciate it. You certainly did it right 20 years ago, no question about it. And enjoy the graduation and everything that comes with it, Sam.
All right, thank you.
All right, Sam Hornish Jr., who probably should be a weekly guest now on the program, no question about it.